Welcome, listeners, to www.ironradio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. Thanks for listening.
Good morning, everybody. You're on another episode of Iron Radio. This is Phil Stevens. I am a strength coach, powerlifter, Highland Games athlete, maker of many awesome things for people in the fitness industry.
Nice. This is Dr. Mike Nelson, creator of the Flex Diet certification, BizFlex certification, which will open again in March. And only 2 days left here in Mexico. So I had some good kiteboarding sessions for about 4 days, and heading back home in about 2.5 days.
This is Coach Darrell at a strength field in KC. Weightlifting coach, strength and conditioning coach, and just a regular Joe gym owner.
Kansas's most eligible bachelor.
Yeah.
And I'm Lonnie Lowry, ex-phys and nutrition professor for about 25 years, former competitive bodybuilder, and stuff like that. My legs are rocked from physical therapy, unweighted squats. Oh my God. Embarrassing. You got to start somewhere, though.
I haven't done it in a while. Yep.
Yeah. That atrophy from bed rest is real, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Phil, I know you guys were talking about, you're going to get back on the conference circuit a little bit or something here.
Yeah, a little bit. I was just going to shout it on the show. If anybody's interested, I just posted on the Iron Radio page. Jim is having me down. There's a local strongman competition coming up, and they're actually going to be doing like an actual Highland Games event in their strongman competition, which I've seen before, but they fuck it up and change the rules. This is the first time they're doing weight over bar, and they're using Highland Games rules when they borrow a sport. Anyways, these people, of course, have no experience. So can you come down and teach us for a day? And it just got me thinking about doing seminars again. So if anybody wants to make it to this one, I think it's $20 for the day. You just sign up at the gym, go on the Iron Radio's page. You can come down there and then give a shout out. If anybody thinking about hitting the road again. So if anybody wants a 1-day seminar, drop me a line. Talk your facility into it. I know Mike Williams, which we all know, was talking about it. His place in Colorado, he's a firefighter. I was like, oh yeah, those firefighters need help.
Yeah. You know, that's a good one. I spoke to a group of firefighters on nutrition stuff. God, it was probably, it was more than 5 years ago. But they were just really appreciative guys. You know, they're like, we just want to know, stuff about protein. What's going on in sports nutrition, and because it applies to them, you know.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, firefighters are fun because there is that strength aspect, and as well as the endurance aspect. But
I have a buddy. I won't hold his name, but he's a serious lifter. He's not huge, but he's one of these guys who's just always muscular all the time, you know. And he was telling me stories about, because he's an EMT and he works with firefighters and stuff. And I don't know, like some of the guys, they get so out of shape, like they pass some kind of physical. And I don't know what the rules are now. I mean, if there's a listener who wants to correct me on this, great. But at least back in the day, they'd qualify and then they would kind of fall apart. And then he's like, God, am I going to have to carry this guy out of the building? You know, he's supposed to be the guy that's saving people.
Yeah.
You know,
that's the thing with fire departments I've seen. There is no like national standard. It varies from department to department how in shape each one is. Like even here, like the town 30 minutes away has an amazing department that like they have standards and you have to stay in shape. Whereas here in town, it's like, oh my God, you're coming to save me. So it's like once they're grandfathered in, you're in. So it doesn't matter your shape, and that's one thing with me with any of the police officers and firefighters and stuff. It's like we should have some kind of standard. You know, you're a public servant that's expected to do a job, and if you can't do that job, so anyway.
I'm surprised, like the NSCA and their tactical training. You know, that's popular stuff. Maybe they're working with they'd have to work with individual states, I would think, almost to implement some of their,
you have to work with each department, essentially. Yep. So even here, Kansas in general, like every department is like almost a completely separate unit. There's really no unifying aspect for police or fire. I mean, there's like, kind of basic union level stuff, but it's not like there's nothing organized to the point of like, oh man, they should have X, Y, and Z across the board nationally. Like every single
fire department
is way different.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yep.
So,
I know Mike was talking a little bit about conferences and seminars and stuff too, and I think he and Jarrell had agreed that Mike was going to lay down a list of the most toxic people he would never go see. Not really, but you did have some rules, right? That, like, what are some of your rules for yourself when you do this stuff?
I mean, I've told people who want to book me for seminars that if it's in the middle of absolute nowhere and I don't really know the people there, odds of me going are pretty slim.
Mm-hmm.
If I could kiteboard or snowboard or mountain bike or something nearby, ooh, your odds just went up substantially. And the amount you'd probably have to pay me actually goes down, which I probably shouldn't tell people. But and the other thing too is, do I know the person organizing it? And then do I know the other speakers there? And do I actually want to hang out with them?
Right.
Which I know sounds weird. Like I did the NEC conference this past October for Jason Leiden for his crew at CrossFit Milford. And it was great. Like Brett Bartholomew was there, Bo Sandoval. I got to hang out with Kelly Starrett again, which was great. A whole bunch of people. Another friend of mine she's in the military. She's done a lot of great stuff with sleep, Dr. Allison. And yeah, it was great. But that one was honestly a pain in the ass to get to because we were in South Padre, Texas. We had just drove down there. And so we had to fly all the way to Milford, Connecticut, which was not the easiest place to get to.
Oh, yeah.
But it was great. Everyone was super cool, and the lineup was great, and Jason's awesome, and it was super fun. So stuff like that I'll still do. But I can tell you that if that lineup was different and I didn't know the person organizing, probably not going to happen. Yeah. So there's a very short list of people who I'm like, if that person's there, then I'm definitely not there. So,
well, that's part of it now. I mean, you also have to realize that people don't realize this. Like, if you choose to speak somewhere with somebody else, like, you're in a way joining your name with them.
Especially in person. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're in a way doing like guilty by association, and if somebody's that far off your radar, like, it's probably just best not to do it. So,
yeah, especially small events where it's just like a couple days. I mean, some of the bigger events you can't control, and even some of the bigger online events it's hard to control. But if it's a handful of people and it's like 2 days, or sometimes there's only like a couple speakers, then it's like, okay, come on, man, like you know what's going on.
Yeah. The value is not just in the slides, right? It's the conversations you have and all that kind of stuff. So, if you don't like the people, and, for someone's new at doing that, and I do encourage you at least go, even just Google, strength conditioning or sports nutrition seminars. There's some good ones to go around. And if you don't know, I guess you're taking a stab in the dark. I mean, at least, you guys have your veterans and you have who's going to be, probably better or more fun or whatever. But yeah. It's a good consideration.
Yeah. Well, I know there's outline. What they want you to talk on is a big one too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, what do you want me to talk about? And that's like, I really like it now more coming in with a plan that fills up about half the time and then leaving half the time to the audience. Leave and it's like, what do you guys want to hear? What do you want to learn? Like, here's what I have laid out half each day, and let's leave half for them. And those seem to be the best. It's like, what do you need more work on? Whereas if I have it all laid out, here's 2 days worth of shit, and there's no free time, they tend to get less out of it. So,
yeah, that's smart.
Shameless plug to the Real Coaches Conference, which is coming up in Vegas in March. I presented there last year, which was great. Ram did an awesome job with it, and if people are interested, they can see the lineup online. Like I said, I'm not presenting this year, but I'll still be there hanging out. And yeah, it was a great time last year. And so check that one out. I know there's a bunch of other ones probably coming up soon. Lonnie and I will be at ISSN again in June also.
The Arnold's coming up. I don't know if anybody's going.
Oh man, I lost track of that.
Yeah, but I don't know anybody who's going this year. Like, it's fallen off, but it's got to be right around the corner in the next 2 weeks. Yeah, it's next weekend.
Did that rebuild? How did that rebound after the pandemic? Because, the whole super spreader events and all that crap was shutting things down, and some things were crawling back.
I went to the last 2, and it still was not near what it was.
Really?
Yeah.
It's all about the slap fighting now.
Yep, and it was weird. It was just like you'd go in there, and you could tell they were reaching to sell expo spots. You'd be like, Jim's gutter service at the
the gutter
Arnold?
service.
Why are you?
over
Yeah,
there.
what are you doing?
What?
Yeah, they had like,
Oh yeah.
vinyl siding on your home. And it's like, wrong
Yep.
conference, bro.
See, that's going to dilute it, and then
Yeah.
it's like anti-marketing. People get whiff of that. They're like, I'm not going to go back for that.
I am not sending a single booth there this year, and I usually send a lot. So
Yeah. I mean, people are like, I want supplement freebies and T-shirts. I don't want gutters. I don't know. All right. I have 2 little pieces of news before we get into our topic today, and I'll let Phil explain the topic more, but it's basically about, as a beginner, especially as a youth, what do you focus on first, and some of the mistakes people make, because, yeah, they make a lot. One of these pieces I have is on collagen. And I know we've talked about this over the years, and Phil and I touched on this the other week, because we were joking about, you can only put so much collagen in your coffee before you have kind of like coffee flavored Jello,
Mm-hmm.
But this is the paper. It's from Lee and colleagues. To give you some details here from the Journal of Nutrition. Collagen synthesis response to an acute bout of resistance exercise is greater when ingesting 30 grams versus 15 versus 0 in resistance-trained young men. I can't remember if I did a deep dive on this one last time or not. I think I just talked about it. But essentially what they did was they're talking about how the literature is mixed. And we were talking about this, like acute versus chronic. Acutely, things happen, and then, you can only hope that they add up. But, this is from November. But they took, just again, some details for everybody. 10 resistance-trained males. They were 26 years old. They gave them 0, 15, or 30 grams of hydrolyzed collagen. Also 50 mgs of vitamin C. And, I was talking to my wife about this earlier. I don't think there's anything magical about stacking vitamin C. I mean, you have to think about, when you do like a calcium study, they'll give people vitamin D just to make sure that they're not deficient in it. They're just kind of covering the bases while they focus on the main ingredient. So, yes, vitamin C helps with hydroxy, lysine, hydroxyproline, like cross-bridging and collagen, and I get all that. But I think that gets overstated sometimes, like, oh, you need this magical combination. But anyway, in this study, they did 4 sets of 10 RM back squats, and then they did blood sampling for like 6 hours. They looked like different markers, pro-collagen, different amino acids that are of interest. Their conclusion, if I just cut to the end, because I know we touched on this some before, ingesting 30 grams of hydrolyzed collagen before high-intensity resistance exercise augments the whole body collagen synthesis more than 15 or 0 in resistance-trained young males. So they're kind of getting at the idea that this dose response, that maybe we're not giving people enough. It kind of makes sense when you look at area under the curve and what amino acids would show up as building blocks. I mean, when you do studies with muscle protein synthesis, there is sort of a linear response. I mean, 5 grams is better than 0, 10 is better than 5, 15 is better than 10. You get the idea. Mm-hmm. And up to a point, it's pretty linear. So it doesn't surprise me that would be true with collagen as well. So if 30 grams is kind of where the literature is headed, and again, that would explain why it's been mixed before, right? Like, some studies say it helps, some say it doesn't. And I've looked at this stuff. I know Mike has too. It's really mixed. Maybe it's just a dose issue. If it is 30 grams, though, that's going to disappoint a lot of companies that are selling collagen because it's, back in the day, like we said, it's cheap. But if you have to give a whole lot, if you have to give a 30-gram dose, that's not really something you can put in your coffee. And, and I'm not saying it's a threshold, it's 30 or nothing. This study suggests 30. To me, that could limit it. It's not going to keep marketers from selling underdosed products, of course. I don't. Mike, have you seen anything lately? Because I know that you're well read on this literature about dose response and all that.
Yeah, so as far as I'm aware, this was the highest dose response that I've seen published so far. There's some other work showing as low as 7.5 grams potentially. Most of the research I would say before this, I usually target 10 to 15 grams.
Yeah.
So yeah, this study was interesting. I have another article on it, I think, coming up at some point. Yeah, in terms of the mechanisms, like when I talk to friends of mine that are collagen researchers, we don't know yet if it's the amino acid content, because as you guys know, collagen has more different amino acids in it, especially glycine, etc. Or there's some other data showing that there might be peptides that are released from the collagen in and of itself that might be doing the effect. Most of the studies I've read, like this one, you have to time it before exercise. The vitamin C amount, like if you talk to Keith Barr, who did that original study with Shaw, looking at adding vitamin C and collagen before exercise, God, probably 5 or 6 years ago now, he's not entirely sure that the vitamin C, like you said, Lonnie, makes any difference. But the hard part is if you're trying to match research to what is historically done, it'll probably be a while before that changes, because everyone's like, well, this study, they used vitamin C and you did it and you didn't get a result, and that's why you didn't get the result. And so everyone just kind of will copy that forward for a while so we have
Standard.
more data to look at it. Yeah, because you're like, well, this, matches the earlier literature.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I know Keith Barr is probably going to publish a study later this year. I haven't heard the results, where they took a placebo group and then they took just basically the amino acid profile from collagen, but not using collagen, just like you can get essential amino acids from whey protein. So they did that, and then they used the same amount of collagen. And they're going to compare that and see, is it really the amino acids? Is it maybe more of these peptides? That study will at least give us some idea on that. But yeah, I tend to tell athletes 10 to 15 grams. I know this new study says higher. Before exercise, if you're trying to target soft tissue, 40 to 60 minutes beforehand. And then also, you probably want to target whatever you're doing in the early part of your training session. There's some molecular data that the targeting effects may only stay on, quote unquote, for 10 to 15 minutes. So I would have people do specific isometrics and other things at the start of their exercise, almost as part of their warm up, and then put the main exercise that we want to target those effects to earlier in the training session as opposed to later.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, this does say area under the curve for glycine and proline were higher with 30 grams. Well, yeah, you would think you would absorb them. You're dosing more. You'd have more in there.
Yeah.
But it's like a few weeks ago we talked about. Then you look at the chronic stuff, and they're like, yeah, after X number of weeks, mechanically or structurally, there's no difference. And you're like, oh, well, crap. And I don't want to get into that conversation again, but this is one of those things like we talked about before. Acutely, if I'm going to see more synthesis going on, yeah, I'll put as much as I can. Maybe I'll put 5 or 10 grams in each of my cups of coffee throughout the morning instead of 30 all at once and having little brown Jell-O cubes. So
drink your coffee with a spoon.
No, right? Yeah, I'm not going to ruin my coffee.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be my take home from this is, yeah, just keep it coming if you can. Like have a couple cups of coffee in the morning before you go work out. Sure, take your vitamin C if you want. Anyway, the other one I have is about omega-3 fatty acids. It's called long-chain omega-3s and exercise-induced muscle damage, EPA or DHA. And this has come up, for ages. And Phil, you remember, and I think, Mike, you remember, like I created that Flame Out product for Biotest with Tim Patterson and those guys. And I made it heavier on DHA because there looks like there could be some gender differences and maybe men would benefit a little bit more. But there hasn't been much research teasing apart, right? Because when you take fish oils, they're a mix of EPA and DHA. And that's what they're trying to address here. This is Heilson, Heileson, and colleagues. This is from MedSci Sports Exercise, brand new. In fact, March of this year, and it's not even March yet. So they say long-chain omega-3 PUFA, polyunsaturates, EPA and DHA may enhance recovery from exercise-induced muscle damage. However, it's unclear if the effects are due to EPA or DHA or both. So they took 30 males, randomized them to 4 grams a day. So that's a good whopping dose of EPA plus DHA, or just EPA, or just DHA versus placebo. Okay, so 7 weeks of supplementing. Then they had them run downhill, and that's what I did in my dissertation, looking at a specific fat. It's a very similar study, actually. Ran them downhill, and then they had them do jumping lunges, 5 sets of 20. So, yeah, these guys are going to get sore. They're going to get rocked from this kind of stuff.
That's hideous.
Yeah. Oh, I know. I mean, when I did a 45-minute downhill run, and especially because I used a lot of lifters. They were more heavily built guys. I mean, just your whole body is wrecked when you run downhill.
Oh, yeah.
So, and they looked at the omega-3 index, and Mike, I know you measured this in some of your clients, the percent EPA and DHA in their erythrocytes, their red blood cells. And they looked at leg press performance plus some markers of inflammation. So here, what do they find when they try to separate this out versus fish oils combined? And you can almost not find super heavy DHA or super heavy just EPA supplements. If you dug, you could, but oftentimes, again, they're together. Leg press performance was lower in the placebo group at 24 hours compared with EPA, and at 72 hours with both EPA and DHA. So, again, they're looking at the effects of these individual ones mostly that are shining. Compared to placebo, muscle soreness was lower in the DHA group and the EPA groups at 48 hours. So again, this is a typical time course you'd look at. It goes out. I went out to 120 hours in this time course, but yeah, they're showing some differences with these individual fish oil fatty acids. Further, jump performance in power metrics improved more rapidly in the EPA and in the DHA groups. Measures of inflammation, range of motion, and muscle swelling were similar between all the groups. Now, it's worth noting, and I just saw a physical therapist do this to me, and like when they look at range of motion, you got to be real careful. I would want a very skilled person, unless they're digitizing it. But if they're using like a goniometer and they're looking at range of motion, I mean, you're not going to be so ruined that you can't fully extend your leg, for example, or your range of motion is going to be badly limited. So I would want to read, the specifics of how they did range of motion. Inflammation, we know that fish oils are anti-inflammatory, and it depends on specifically, I think, what they looked at. I mean, you could look at anything from, IL-6 in the body to, and they looked at swelling, like presumably like girth. You could probably look at a lot of things there, but they didn't see much going on here from that perspective. Again, even though biochemically we know some of that's happening. Anyway, it says compared with placebo, 4 grams per day of EPA or DHA for 52 days improves certain aspects of recovery from DOMS, exercise-induced muscle damage. It said EPA plus DHA, and again, that's how you normally buy it, did not clearly enhance recovery. Equivalent dosing of EPA plus DHA may blunt the performance effects of EPA or DHA alone. So that was interesting that they teased it apart like that. So separating out your fish oil ingredients. I made an attempt to do that back in the day, again with a DHA heavy product, but it's not just one thing. Fatty acids each have their own name, and that's for a reason. Oleic acid, the healthy fat in olive oil, the monounsaturated, or eicosapentaenoic acid, EPA, or docosahexaenoic acid, DHA. They have their own names because they're nutraceutical in nature. CLA, which is what I did my dissertation on. So I don't know what the practical apply this is, because it's really hard to get fish oils that aren't just one or the other. My bias is, again, there's some indication in the literature that maybe men could use the DHA a little bit more. So that's why, I've leaned that way in product formulation before, but it's not like hard and fast, like, sex differences necessarily. So Mike, any news that about separating out the ingredients, if you will, of fish oils?
From what I've seen, and again, I'm working on the dietary fats chapter for the Human Kinetics book on metabolic flexibility as we speak, actually. It just seems like the combination is probably best. Like, you can find some outline stuff, like you said, Lonnie, of DHA is a little bit better, EPA is a little bit better. Then you get into the issue of, could you convert DHA to EPA and EPA
Right.
to DHA? And
Right.
I can't find any consensus on the literature on that. I know back in the day they used to say you couldn't, retroconvert either one. Now, I don't know if they're so sure on that.
Yeah.
The only thing I can think of is and I've had some clients who are on like Vasipa, or I think it used to be called Omicor, which is basically just a prescription EPA, usually for high triglycerides. So some of those cases, I've looked at their, omega-3 status and like, oh man, like you probably need some DHA. Or the one I just read on a client the other day, his EPA was, blood levels of like 3.7, his DHA was like 0.4. It's like, I don't know, but I'd probably go a little bit heavier on DHA. But I can't find a lot of literature that says EPA or DHA is far superior for anything in particular, though.
Yeah, it's over the decades, and I watch this, lipids are one of the things I'm interested in, and it's just hard to act on it anyway, because, you're not having companies selling super refined just DHA. And I mean, DHA is something they focus on with cognition and infant formulas and stuff like that, but you're right, the way the body can interconvert and retroconvert things, there's not a lot of that going on, but it's confusing to read some of that literature. It's not always clear, but yeah, I think that maybe the take home, if it's hard to buy a product that's specifically one or the other, or like you said, if you could look at your blood values and try to narrow it down and see what you're changing, but people just underconsume omega-3 so badly. World Health Organization and other authorities would say get like 7-to-1 typical vegetable oils to the fish oils, if you will, the omega-6 to the omega-3, or 4-to-1 or even 2-to-1. But in the U.S., we consume 17-to-1 of the omega-6 to the omega-3. It's grotesquely imbalanced. And we know, even despite this particular paper, and let's face it, they could overwhelm inflammatory things. When they do an exercise bout like this, that's just brutal, you got to be careful. You're almost looking for that sweet spot. You want to damage them, micro-trauma them a little bit, but not so much that it overwhelms the ability of anything to help. So the protocols are a big deal too. How much eccentric exercise do you do and all that kind of stuff? Because, they didn't show anti-inflammatory, clinically relevant kinds of things acutely here, but we know that fish oils are anti-inflammatory. And it's not surprising that they help with a lot of, inflammatory diseases, things like arthritis or cardiovascular disease, because they're anti-inflammatory, and those are inflammatory kind of chronic states. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting. They're trying to tease it apart. It's a brand new paper, and it's one of the things that I've been interested in over the years. Can you tease it apart? Even what I looked at with CLA in my dissertation, that's a group of different isomers. If you remember back, there was a lot of talk about which isomer does what. Yeah, so lipid chemistry is too ugly for most people to really dive into, probably. Talking about these, various delta desaturases and all this stuff. And take home is go get your fish oils. I would go supplement them. It's hard to eat enough. And I do like they give a good whopping dose. 4,000 milligrams. That's nice, man. That's a good whopping dose. They were not playing games. I don't think there was a low dose issue here. So, the average person gets probably less than 250 milligrams a day, something like that. In the West, it's bad. It's bad. Okay.
And you said they measured the omega-3 index, so they're actually looking at a physiologic level too. It's not like, hey, we just dosed a bunch of people and hopefully it worked. Like, they actually look to see what happened with it, which unfortunately is not done in a lot of studies. So I agree with that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, on some level, you could assume it gets in, but it's nice to have a number. Like, yes, that definitely got incorporated. You at least want to know their starting point, like you said. Otherwise, you're assuming everyone's low, which is probably a pretty good assumption. But you could have the outliers that are a little bit higher, and then you give them amount, and now you're comparing, different amounts in their body, not just the dosing per se. Mm-hmm. No, that's true. I mean, whether it's testosterone or vitamin D or whatever, baseline kind of matters, because that tells you that if you're correcting a deficiency, you're probably going to get better effects.
Yes.
Yep.
All right. Let's go to break, and then we come back. Phil's going to talk about skill training, and especially with youth and that kind of thing, and how it gets done wrong.
Yeah.
Hey everybody, Iron Radio is back, and in an expanded way. What can you expect? Well, first, you can get it simulcast every week on the nutritionradio.org network, as well as on the original podcast. It'll appear regularly on iTunes, Spotify, and all your favorite podcasting sites. We have a new Iron Radio / Nutrition Radio Facebook page as well. Please check us out. We're even backed up on YouTube. We hope that an expanded presence will get you the news, education, banter, and guests that's made Iron Radio's community so loyal from the start. You are appreciated.
Okay, everybody, we're back. And actually, we were just talking about it off the air. Like, one thing that brought this up was my daughter's been in state wrestling recently. So just watching the wrestlers, and I ranted about this the other day. People, if you're on the Iron Radio Facebook group, you can see it. But one of the things that annoys me today is you see all these specialized, that's my air quotes going up, schools opening up for youth, and you've seen them for a while, but they prey on kids and parents, and it's like these specialized skill schools, like, oh, little Johnny's slow, he needs to come in here and we'll just have him do sprints and shuttle runs and he'll get better. And one thing that it ignores, and I think it's worse in our population today, is like little Johnny doesn't have a base built. Like, even in our day, like the average kid now spends their whole day like on a device, whereas the average kids at our age spent the whole day riding bicycles and playing pickup ball. And the generations prior to us were even more just in general shape. The biggest thing I see now is kids that are just, they have zero base built. They can't run their own body. And parents are 100% bought into, I'm going to send Johnny to Jim, whatever the place is called, Jim's School of Agility, and he's going to do what Patrick Mahomes does. And they don't realize that, well, little Johnny isn't where Patrick Mahomes was, and they have this lack of understanding that all the speed, agility drills, and plyometrics they're going to have him do, in many ways, are many times more dangerous than just basic lifting. And it's that basic lifting that little Johnny needs to be able to handle those stressors. Mm-hmm. One thing that I put up to make people understand this is, like, think of your kid as a Toyota Corolla, and if we take that Toyota Corolla and we can take it to the track and have it drive really fast, quarter miles, and the driver's going to get a little better, but that car ain't going to go much faster. His reaction time or some shit might go up a little bit, but if we take the time and put a little more horsepower into that thing, we're going to make drastic increases. Or if we change the suspension and things like that. Like LeBron James is a Lamborghini. Jimmy's a Corolla. And you can't ask the Corolla to do with its stock parts what the Lamborghini can do with its stock parts. So we should probably train them in a different way. And my argument was just that, like, what's missing now in kids in general is a base level of strength and performance, and we need to not put the cart before the horse. Like, let's not ask them to do super advanced things that's going to help somebody that's already elite and already has a base built before they do. So that's kind of what I wanted to flesh out a little bit. What are your guys' thoughts on that? I mean, in my world, I mean, today with the kids I see, and that's not saying these drills are useless, but most of what I'm seeing is if they're practicing their sport, like my son does football, my daughter does wrestling, in their sport, they're getting tons of that skill training. Like, the biggest thing I can see as a benefit is, from a strength and conditioning aspect, is just basic work to build the structure through the high school age. Like, why am I going to have them? He's out there on the football field running shuttle runs and cone drills and things like that. Like, more of that is only going to do so much. Whereas if I just make him strong compared to his sport, we're going to save injuries. The connective tissue is going to be built. Like, parents don't understand the stresses of if your little kid's a wide receiver and coach is asking him to run full speed for 10 yards, plant a foot, and turn directions. Like the amount of stress on that joint when Jimmy can only squat 38 pounds, like there's a reason he's slow coming out of that cut. And you'll see them, like those kids, they'll stutter step. They don't have the strength and connective tissue built to just take that impact. So you'll see this stutter step thing go, and then they make their turn. And of course they're slow on their turn. They can't handle the forces to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Type of thing.
Yeah, decelerate and all that.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of sheer force there is to do that is huge, and yet they're afraid to let their kid squat 48 pounds. But they're totally okay with that. And how many knee injuries do we see and things like that? So
I think this is like we've said for a long time. This is why you have a separate strength coach or nutritionist. You don't let the head coach do all this stuff. I mean, the Mel Williams Basic Sports Nutrition book does a really good job. And Mel Williams was an exercise physiologist. He wasn't a dietitian kind of thing. But he separates physical fitness, which muscular strength is part of that, right? Mm-hmm. And that's where the nutritionist steps in to build a bigger engine, bigger muscles, better connective tissue, stronger muscles, versus sports-related fitness, which is more like agility and all that kind of stuff, and tracking and all the things that a coach might do. But it's almost like the head coach has to have respect for the strength coach to build the engine. Just progressive resistance training. These kids just don't have it. Man,
yes.
3 sets of 10 with a barbell, get after it. And that's like a separate task than what you do on the field, and I love what you're saying because we're driving them into, and I think J.L. Holdsworth talks about this. Like they don't have basic, even agility things. Like they can't even crawl around like laterally forward and back on their hands and feet. And we're asking them to do really specific skills. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, they can't control their own body. And I mean, another way to look at it is like when I follow the NFL a lot, and I just enjoy the sport because there's lots of athletic freaks in it. When a defensive or offensive lineman gets picked up, these are, let's say it's a first-round pick. And one thing they always say is, well, wait till he gets into an NFL strength and conditioning program. Give him a couple years in there. Even at that level, they know their strength is behind, and you don't think Jimmy's isn't, and it's a lack of understanding that, basic strength limits all those other strength aspects. Like you can't endure something until you can do something. Like if I need to carry a 50-pound sack, if I can't pick it up, how am I supposed to endure with it? I probably just need to get strong enough to pick it up. Or if little Johnny needs to throw a 16-pound shot put 50 feet and he can barely pick it up, then we probably don't need to practice the shot put. We need to make him strong enough to have some excess for whatever sport he's doing. And I'm not saying train people like powerlifters. Like you don't need to take an NFL wide receiver or a high school wide receiver and make him squat 600 pounds. But if he can squat 315, it's probably going to help. There's diminishing returns to that size of the motor you put in a vehicle for what you want it to do. But the resounding theme I always have is like find out the strength needs for the activity you're going to do and have a little more. It's only going to help you perform and probably stave off injury a bit. Whereas if you're at this massive lack of strength, then it doesn't matter the skill you have. Like your brain can have that function in it, but if the body's not able to do what you're asking it to just on a basic strength level, you're in trouble. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think and it's usually the parents, and they're kind of in a bad position information wise to understand like what's going on with the strength stuff. And there's just like a stigma against lifting weights in general, like all around. Like the idea that, strength training or lifting is just like automatically dangerous just because it like kind of seems dangerous. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't, and most people have no idea how far off they are from the problems of strength training, I would say. Like you're not, like you see somebody, tearing their knees up or something when they do some like 800-pound squat and they fall and it looks horrific. So you have no idea how far off you are from that. You're not even, remotely close to strong enough to hurt yourself in that way a lot of times. If you're just doing stupid stuff, you can hurt yourself. But also, they just don't understand where that line crosses into when they should be doing more. And it's not even like they should do sport specific stuff, because the agility stuff is not sport specific. Like dancing through speed ladders is not specific to any sport whatsoever. And I mean, Devontae Adams came out a while ago, and they're like, he's like, how do you get, blah, blah, blah. He's like, I see all these guys doing dancing through speed ladders. He's like, you want to get good at running routes, you run routes.
Yeah.
You work on running the route. And so it's hard to explain to people in the sense of like their overwhelming complexity to sells better. So it feels like, oh, okay, this is a complicated, whatever. But honestly, if you're putting more force into the ground up to for a long time, most of the kids will never exceed the strength base by the time they leave high school or within the first few years of college. So you have all the way, at least through the first few years of college, if you're very consistent and diligent, that you won't even exceed that. So you could just do strength training and practice your sport through the first couple of years of college, and you'll probably be fine. Like, you'll probably be ahead of the game, actually, just if you just do the basics and then practice your sport. So I think it's just a misunderstanding of, an inherent fear of foundational strength and basics in general. And then on top of that, it's, they're sold the overwhelming complexity of like, oh man, why your kid's not jumping high is, left toe isn't active or something like that. And it's like, it's tough to sell strength as well, because it's not something that just happens in 12 weeks. Like, you have to have a consistent, deliberate, dedicated commitment to it for your whole, essentially, high school career. It's not something you do for 6 weeks and it's like, all right, that's enough, and you don't do whatever, like that kind of thing. So it's very tough sell and kind of a tough education piece to get through to parents, I would say.
Yeah, and one thing I think that brought this up to me was like watching youth wrestling. And it's very apparent at a young level. Like when you get to the pro level, everybody's just strong. It is what it is. They have 20 years of training into them. But at the youth level, what was apparent to see was a lot of times the people winning, the girls and boys that were winning, were the strong ones. Meaning, like, the skill a very skilled weak person is going to get beat. If they've just spent time on that. I saw numerous matches where you have a highly skilled wrestler that has spent no time getting stronger, and they get beat by an inferior wrestler that was just stronger. And the strength could beat that technical ability because they were just so weak. Now, the other can be true too. Don't get it wrong. Like, superior skill can out-trump superior strength if that skill is good enough. But they ignore the fact that at the highest level, they're both. Like, they're all both. They're highly skilled and strong. And you see that in all athletics. I mean, the people that are the unicorns are both. And they've taken the time to do both. And I just see that we're missing the boat a lot now. And there's a lot of attention towards that skill. And it's much like Olympic weightlifting used to be in this country. We just need to get more skilled. Well, we're getting beat by the Russians who are taking drugs. And those drugs aren't making them more skilled. There is no steroid for skill.
Right.
So we probably need to get stronger. It was, when I had Olympic lifter that also squatted 1,000. Shane Hammond down. He's like the biggest thing. When he went to the Olympic training hall, he said, what made it stand out, our lifters compared to theirs, and you're talking a dude that squatted 1,000 pounds as a junior, he said they were stronger than us. He said it wasn't the skill. I was a weakling, when he went into those training halls. He said that's why we were getting beat. Did those guys max out? No, but he'd be like, I'd be sitting next to the Iranians and they're like doing sets of 5 with 800. He said, that's nothing. I was nothing. He said, that's why they beat me. It wasn't the skill. It's the level of strength they had. And, Now, all sports, like I said, your basketball player doesn't need to be Shane Hammond. But to do what you ask him to do, if he's weak and he can't jump, jumping's only going to help so much. Jumping more. If we make him a little stronger, he'll be able to explode more. If we put 20 more horsepower in the Corolla, its takeoff time is going to be greater to a point. That sprint time's going to go down because he's able to put more force into the ground and move faster. And hopefully along with that, it's the opposite of what most people think. They think strength training, they think injury. We need to get these parents to realize that strength training equals less injury when done correctly. I don't need to have Jimmy, we're not going to be maxing out all the time and stuff. We're looking to do no harm, which is number one rule of a strength coach. Number one, do no harm. Number two, is it translating to the sport? If what I'm having them do is not translating to better sport, like he can already squat 500, maybe if we make him squat 6 and that does nothing to aid his sport, then we just wasted time. But like my pitcher I had, he came in and he could squat the 15-pound bar. I made him squat 185 without doing any sprints. He went from the slowest kid on the team to the second fastest just by getting stronger, because what was weak link on him and what is the weak link on most kids nowadays is the lack of movement and the lack of play and the lack of building a simple base. And I'd say it's more now than ever. I mean, they just don't have that.
It's a good point about like when you're very strong, and this is true of pros, or like you said, up to a point, there's diminishing returns. But
yes,
when you're really strong, your body weight is a joke. Now you can work on skills, but when you're not strong enough to decelerate, change directions, whatever, oh man, like you don't have a minimum requirement. I really, it's like a threshold, but that's what was encouraging to me when I was younger in bodybuilding, was just being a little bit bigger and stronger than the people around me. It made a real difference. I mean, like you said, it makes a huge difference. And how many people are elite skilled, as they're entering college, let's say? Or, I mean, we got to remember too, you could talk about pros, but these are not fully adults. So like classic textbook, and Mike can speak to this, but bone mineral density, muscle mass, these things are ramping up hugely in your teens and early 20s. So naturally, just chronological age, biological age, I guess, is what's driving some of that development, And so if you can train while that's happening, that's awesome. But yeah, you do also have to remember, you can't take, it's just population specificity. You can't take a 28-year-old adult and compare him to an 18-year-old and say, you train like him. Well, wait a minute. That 18-year-old bone density is still getting stronger, and muscle mass and strength, and hormones and everything is just like hugely in the state of building and flux. So you got to think about that too. They're not just mini adults.
Yeah, it's just getting to that baseline. Well, how about we get there and then complicate things? Everybody wants to complicate things and hook them up to machines and this and that. Is like they just not ready.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most glaring examples, and this is early on when I started, actually getting into weightlifting, or looking into it when I was in high school trying to jump higher. If you look at the NBA, where the actual vertical jump is, I mean, on the court is a big deal. Like that's an active importance. The average vertical jumps of NBA, like you go through the whole NBA versus like the NFL is higher. Yeah. And the only separation there is that it's the football culture of lifting weights. I mean, a lot of those guys come from at least squats, power cleans, really terrible power cleans, even like, squats, power cleans, and culture of weight room stuff. Whereas basketball has almost like an anti-lifting culture, or has had an anti-lifting culture for a long time. And it's still there. I mean, they lift weights kind of, but a lot of them don't, and it's not like I got to see, maybe the movements might have to change a little bit. If you got like a super tall guy versus those running backs are shorter legs kind of thing. But the if that's what you need, right? If you're like, okay, what do you need for your sport? It's like, oh, I need a vertical jump. Okay, well, let's go down the road of who has it and why they have it. And it's usually going to be the base of strength that comes with the strategy of training.
Yeah, I mean, it's no different than, it's easy to grasp that if I can at max pick up 16 pounds, I can only throw that 16-pound ball so far. If I raise that up to 32 pounds without throwing, just that force I'm able to put on it will translate. And that, I think that's what people ignore, is the translation of activities. They think they need to get better at the activity, I need to do the activity more. So they'll go to their sports school and then they'll do more of the same shit off the field. Whereas if you just did basic things that had almost 0% chance to hurt you, it's going to make you better at, like, you can get better at something not exactly practicing it. And I'd say oftentimes more just by getting that basic strength. I mean, what was it Ed Cohn said to me? Because I was talking to him about this topic. He's like, I've never seen somebody sit the bench for being too strong. You don't, you just need, John, you're too strong. You're not playing. No, it doesn't happen. Now, of course, you do see those guys that are just weight room fanatics, and they don't make they've ignored the skill too much. We've seen that on football fields where it's like, oh, Brian Bosworth's jacked, but dude can't play. There's a there is an end to that. I'm not saying it's just stronger, but I'm saying what's being ignored is the strength side, and what's being looked at always is the skill side of the sport. And they don't realize that the lack of basic strength is hindering skill acquisition.
Yeah. Back to basics is something we have to constantly preach in strength conditioning, just progressive resistance training, because Jarrell touched on this earlier, and I think science does us a disservice sometimes with this, is they're talking about, some down in the weeds, super minuscule aspect. I mean, if you look at like the strength and conditioning journals, sometimes they read like this, like big toe EMG during unstable vibration platform, single leg. It's like, okay, what? How about we put a barbell in these kids' hands? And I mean, what's going to have a bigger deal? I'm not saying that's not, if that's your field and you're a foot biomechanics expert or something, all right, I guess. But sometimes it does feel like we are way in the weeds, and we really do need to come back to basics.
Yeah, it's no different than the nutrition field. The guy that eats shit all the time but takes his, he eats every meal at McDonald's, but I take my fish oils. You're putting the fucking cart before the horse, bro. Mm-hmm. You buy that little supplement, but 99% of your diet's shit. It's not helping.
That's where supplements go bad. Yeah, instead of it's Band-Aid on a bullet wound. Just like barbell training is back to basics, so is like, how about you just get your macros in order?
Yes, and that's what I'm getting at. Is like there's too high of a concentration on the minutia and not on the basics. Like the minutia comes at the elite level. Patrick Mahomes practicing this one-legged twisting squat thing is useful now because he's already has that base, and they didn't ignore that. I guarantee you the training he's doing now with his coach is drastically different than when he was in high school, because that's where he's at. That doesn't mean you get to skip those steps and go there. Mm-hmm. You need to build that base first to have the ability to even do that correctly. You're not going to throw a 60-yard bomb when you're like my 8-year-old kids that can only throw a football 15 yards. Me just having them throw a football over and over again is only going to go so far unless I give them more tissue and horsepower.
Well, when everything you do is so submaximal, like you said, with the weight of an implement, if it's a shot or a football, whatever it is, if that used to be like, let's X%, a high percentage of your maximum, now it's like 60%. Now it's a joke. Now you can work on some of the skills and stuff. Makes sense.
I mean, you can't swing a kettlebell 100 times when you can barely deadlift 35 pounds. Mm-hmm. So maybe we get your deadlift to 100 and then try swinging the 35-pound kettlebell. It'll be a lot easier.
Most of these, and this is just what I know is based on the videos that I see. Some of them do add some sort of strength element. It's not enough. Like it's almost like they dabble in strength and then they do a lot of, the extra bullshit. But like you could replace the majority of the agility and speed training for kids. And I would say kids up to late high school with at least, somewhat progression based jump rope style program, like some simple jump rope stuff and some hill sprints and sprints. And you don't really need, that extra stuff it's too much. Like dancing through the speed ladder or whatever, like obviously playing your sport, but in terms of like building your athleticism, you need to, jump jump as high as you can here and there. I would maybe educate parents more about because if you let parents kind of be in control of the style of training, it's always like some military boot camp style where it's like all fatigue, it's like all fatigue based and there's no strength and power based. Like you have to rest, right? Doing 3 to 5 reps or whatever, doing short 100% sprints, either on hills and don't do it until they puke. Like it's not what you're after if you're trying to build strength, speed, or athleticism. Like those things are built kind of with, the same strength and power principles as general strength training. Like you go hard, you rest, go hard, you rest. But you can replace most of these programs with, simple jump rope program. I would say barefoot. I'd encourage barefoot so you can strengthen the feet and ankles as well. But, just getting kids to do that, like they come in and they're like, oh yeah, we did speed agility camp or whatever. And I'm like, okay, what'd you do? And they talk about the ladder, speed ladder stuff, or they have like all these little toys out and all this stuff. I'm like, all right, jump rope barefoot for 5 minutes. And they can't get like a minute. So it's like, what are you really after? Besides the parents' money, I guess. But also they believe that they're doing the right, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
People who coach this stuff believe that that's the thing.
Yeah. No, and that's what I'm getting at. Is they do believe, and they sell it, and they sell it well. And the reason it's marketable is because it's marketable because you see these pro athletes doing it. And the bad thing is what the pro athletes doing is not wrong. It is right for where they are at in their progression. But
it's like a celebrity endorsement almost.
Yes.
Because they recognize the name. Name recognition equals, hey, that's correct.
Yeah, if he's doing it, then my kid needs to do that. Your kid is not him yet. He's far from that. He's 12, and he can barely pick himself up off the couch. So, yeah, that's basically my rant is like, Jesus, let's get back to the basics and realize that our society now, the average kid is in piss poor general shape, and they have the strength they have the strength of a kitten. They're not mowing lawns. They're not doing all these things that kids used to do. And they come in, like I would almost guarantee you the average kid leaves elementary school without the ability to do a pull-up. It just is what it is.
Yeah. And then they adjust standards sometimes, like, oh, we just want a bar hang. It's like, well, okay, but careful with that. The norms are normative because of the current state of society, kind of. Yeah, and that'd be interesting, wouldn't it? Like, what if we made the 70th percentile the norm? That's the goal. Excusing it.
And if there's no fear to throw pads on your 6-year-old and have him go out there and run at people at full speed, but you're scared of him squatting a 15-pound bar. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
Like the injuries, let's bulletproof them a little bit. So.
Of all the injuries I've had over the years, and I've had a lot, only one of them was in the middle of a barbell, action. Most of this stuff was because I was running or doing something else stupid.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, my only last comment is I have this theory that the Russians invented speed ladders and sold them to the U.S. to set our whole system back for freaking decades.
Oh, yeah.
Because to me, that is... I don't know why. Like, you see professionals do it. You see high school kids do it. It's just like this thing that looks cool. But to me, it's almost like I think probably one of the worst things you can do because it's taking away from something else I think you could do that's a much higher quality that may not look as cool. And like you guys said, everyone likes, to look at tools and look at all these speed letters we have and this obstacle course and all this stuff. But I hang out with guys like Sean Mishka and watch him train professionals in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
It's like him, his staff, and maybe a cone. There's like nothing else there.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the level of knowledge and practice and thought that goes into those sessions is a lot. And I think we just want to copy whatever the latest and greatest thing is. It looks cool, and I don't know. I give up looking at most high school movement programs because the ones I saw were just a bunch of kids moving really badly.
Yeah.
Like nobody taught these poor kids how to move well. And like you said, if you can't move well, part of that is because you're weak.
Yes.
So then you got to fix the strength thing. But it just seems like a bunch of kids moving around badly until they're fatigued and they're like, hey, you'll be an amazing athlete. It's like, oh.
Yep. So, all right, guys. Until next week.
Right on.
Yeah.
Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation or maybe buying something from the ironradio.org store. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community. The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.